Hi again, so my name's Karen and today we're going to be making egg cups. Okay, so there's two different ways that we're going to do this. So one of them I'm going to class as your secret project because we'll be focusing on this little one, this little chappy here. But just in case people like, oh, we want something a bit different, I did like a Loch Ness Monster kind of themed one. Not perfect, I'm sure yours will be even more amazing. It was just to give you an idea of things that you could potentially do to make your egg cup a wee bit more different than just a little chicken, alright? Okay, so again, we're going to be doing the idea of pinch pots. So by the end of this, you will be amazing at pinch potting and making sure that everything is attached nicely. So for the pinch pot, you don't actually need a lot of clay, not for these little projects. So this is quite a big amount of clay, which you don't need. So again, I'm going to half that again. And I'm just using my fingers for it. So that should be a nice shape. Again, it might be a wee bit bigger. So we'll give it a wee try and see in case you need to half it a wee bit more. We'll just half it a wee bit more actually. So I now have two. So originally it was one big huge slab, halved it a wee bit, and then I've halved it again. So we have additionals. So we'll just put one to the side, just now, out of the way, and we'll roll the other one. So just in case you're wondering what tools you need, so we'll just go over it. I've covered my table with a black bin bag. That just makes sure that if there's any waste or mess, it goes onto a surface that I can just easily put in the bin and I don't need to worry about the tidy up. Okay, I've got a bowl of water, I've got a sponge, and I've got some blue tools, and I've got some slip. Things that you need, okay? Okay, so I now have a bowl ready to pinch pot. Again, like when you're doing with the big bird and when you're doing the funky fish, your thumbs need to go in, but if you're like me, your hands are a wee bit bigger, then you need to use maybe a wee something smaller, again, like the big bird. I use the end of a paintbrush. You can use the end of a paintbrush, end of a pen or a pencil, anything that's maybe a wee edge at the bottom. It can be flat or smooth, up to you, but you want to make sure you can put it in and just gently circle it round, okay? Just so the idea of the pinch pot it's going. Now remember, you need to make sure it's big enough for an egg to go in, but not too big of where you lose the egg. It's that happy medium that you need to get. Now, if some people want to go get the egg and measure it, that's fine. I personally wouldn't advise to do that just now because your clay is just going to stick to your egg. So before you rush away to get it and to think, oh, that's a good idea, it's not just yet. Trust me, it's not. Okay, so made a wee start, but I'm now going to gently use my thumb and just gently press it out a wee bit more. Okay, like that. And in case you're thinking, Karen, that's not going to hold an egg, it will. Trust me, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. Okay, so I've got that, and again I've got a wee bit of a thicker base, so I'm just gently going to, I'm using the back of my thumb to smooth it out, but that's because I've got long fingernails. If you're like me, you've got long fingernails, I would use the back, otherwise you can use just your finger and press it in and bring it up and just thin it out a wee bit, because what you want to do is get the curve, and this is where it's really important, is you want to get the curve, because the curve is where it's going to hold the egg quite nicely. So you want to make sure you get it curving nicely. So it's got a nice base and it'll hold the egg nicely for you, and that's what you want. Okay, so all the way around. So again, don't worry if it's a wee bit raggedy. You don't want it too ragged, not like raggedy of where the clay's drying out, because if that's the case, then you want to get a little bit of water on your sponge and just give it a wee wipe round, okay? There we go. So we've got a nice wee egg cup, okay? So that's going to be what you're working from, okay? So now what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing the stem bit. Different people will tell you different ways of doing it. There's 2 options. There could be potentially be more, but we'll go with the 2 options that I'm going to give you. Again, a wee ball of clay. Now, the 2 options are, you're going to love it, okay. You can either roll it out flat, so it's like a sausage, okay? You don't want a flat sausage, so you don't want it flat one side and then round the other, so you want to gently make sure it does actually roll flat and it gets a little bit of curve. So flat, okay, so once you've done that, okay, so that's one, and then you're like, but Karen, it's a wee bit raggedy, well, you're going to trim it. So you can either use your tool to trim it at each side, just give it a wee cut, and that'll be you, okay? So that's one way of doing it, because then you'll be poking a hole in it to make sure, again, it doesn't explode, all right? So that's one option. 2 option, this is where you'll be like, oh, I like this idea, Karen. And then you'll try and you'll be like, my clay is sticking to it. But we'll give you those choices. It's always good to have choices, because one way might work for you and the other way doesn't, okay? Depends. So a wee bit of a ball, but I'm going to squish it flat with my palm. Gently press it down. So remember, we're just making the wee stem, and I'm giving you 2 options. One where we ball and trim it, where we're going to put a hole in it. And then the next one, of where you don't need to put a hole in it, because the hole should already be there. This would depend on if it works for you or not. And in case you're wondering what I mean, you'll begin your pencil or paintbrush or whatever tool you've been using. And this is the exciting thing. You use the pencil, or in my case, the paintbrush at the bottom, and you gently roll it. Now you don't want it too tight, because if you have it too tight, it's just going to stick to it and you can't take it out, and that would be terrible. And you gently roll it so it's nice. And there we go, nice attachment, because remember you're going to be cutting it either way. And then if you think, oh, Karen, I've done a wee bit more work on it, then just give it a wee, just on the outside, not on the inside, just give it a wee smooth. And then it should be fine. And just give it a wee trim. And you should be able to literally take your pencil out, or your paintbrush. So you've got a wee hole all the way through, see that? And then you just make sure you seal it. And this way you add slip, and you seal it quite nicely. Make sure you don't squeeze the hole shut though. And the thing is, if you don't take the pencil out soon enough and you squeeze it on, then ironically, the pencil or paintbrush or whatever tool you're using, you'll find it sticks. As awkward as that sounds, it will be. And if you take it out too soon, then you might potentially squeeze the hole shut. So you need to find the happy medium, which is always a challenge, okay? But what I'm going to do, because I've got a wee roll in there, I'm going to gently smooth that in there as well, just so it's nice and smooth. And don't forget that we're going to be trimming this down, because that's going to be, if it was an egg cup, that'd be like massive, and we don't want that. You might, I don't, you might. I'm going to trim it, and this is where you're like, but now, but I've still got a hole. And remember, you can still put that in and just give it a wee wiggle, and then you're sorted, okay? And you trim. This is where, see how it's closed up? Again, don't worry about it. The hole that's there, poke it through, give it a wee wiggle, and then that'll be you. And if you need to, this is the cheat. Just gently roll it out a wee bit. So it should be nice. And there we go. So that's one. Don't worry about the bases. You can give it a wee gentle tap like that and make sure it's nice and smooth and flat the way you want. Okay? Or you can use your finger. So that's one way. Or if you like, it keeps on sticking to the pencil crown, help me with the other one. So you've rolled it, you've made it wee thing, and then you've trimmed it. So we now need to pull it. So get your tool and poke a hole all the way through. Try and make sure it's in the middle and not coming out the sides of these things, because that would be a little bit awkward. You can give it a wiggle, and then you can maybe use your paintbrush or your pencil, the end of the pencil by the way, and just gently wiggle it in. And again, the same thing can happen potentially with this one of where it sticks. So you've got to be really careful that your paintbrush or your pencil isn't too wet, because remember, if it's really wet and the clay, and you're trying to make a hole in the clay, all you're going to do is have the clay stuck in. So that's not handy. Okay, so I've got two with a hole. Okay, so two different ways to make your little stem. Now, as you notice, this is a tiny stem and these are a little bit larger, but nothing to worry about because we can trim them down. Okay, so you've got your two stems, you have your little pinch pot. So you don't need two stems, but I showed you how to make two stems, two different ways. But what we need now is we're going to do the base, because you need the base to attach the stem to then attach the egg cup. There is method. Okay, so with your scrap clay that you've got, you can use that. Again, rolling ball. Now, again, if your hands are really hot and warm and it's dried out, then take some fresh clay, just a wee bit. Or you can add a wee bit of water to it. You'll need to decide yourself on what your clay feels like. So just now, my clay is still workable and manageable, so I can use it. Palm, just gently press, gently press. Now, what you've got to decide on, if you've not used a big enough bit of clay, then when you put your egg cup on top, it might topple over, which you don't want. So if you think, if we just gently slice it up, oh, it's stuck to the table. With a bit of wet surface there, so I don't really want that. So I'll show you again, just in case. Make sure it's a dry bit, that's the only thing. If it's a wet surface, your clay is going to stick to the wet surface, so make sure you do a dry patch. Gently press down. Now again, if it's too small, that'll be too small for a base, but it depends on the size of your egg cup and your stem. So you need a decent sized base because it needs to support everything else above it. And if it's not big enough at the base, it is going to fall, and that's definitely no good for an egg cup. Okay, so if it means that you just need to put this wee bit of clay to the side, put it to the side, no harm with that. Grab a wee bit more of your bigger bit, because remember you can trim it down and you can use the clay that you've put aside for something else. Okay, because we've got little features and everything to do. Okay, so if it means that you need to maybe add a little bit of water to it, just to get it a wee bit happier, then that's what you do, just a little bit, and you can just add it. Just means it's nice and fresh when you're going to use it. Okay. So I can already tell that this lump of clay is going to be a wee bit too big, but that's fine. Okay, nothing to worry about, because you can trim that down. And just gently press, and then I'm going to lift it and press it again the other side. So I don't want my base to be too fat, and you'll notice that I've moved it each side just simply to make sure it doesn't stick to what I'm working on. So you don't want it too thick, but you don't want it too thin of where there's going to be any unhappy accidents. So can give it nice and smooth, so it lifts off quite easily from the table, always good. And I can circle it, so I'm just tidying up the circle or the sides of it just to make it a wee bit neater to work with. So there we go. So it should be nice and roughly even. If you've got a rolling pin, you can use a rolling pin, or you can use the palm of your hand. It's up to you. So but make sure you can actually lift it off the board. So you got that. Now remember what we're doing, we're adding slip. So again, if you're adding this, you'll be like, is that too big? I think it would be. I want it a wee bit smaller because look at the size comparison. We've got a large one and we have a small one. You don't need the stem that big. So we do need to give it a little bit of trim. Okay. I would probably say half or maybe 3/4. It's up to you. You've got to make the judgment call on how big. And what I'm doing is I'm gently just cutting all the way through, just so I don't lose any of it. There we go. So that's going to be a nice, I think that's a nice V shape. You might find it still a wee bit large, but we won't panic about that just yet. Okay, so you've got to remember, you've got to slip and score it all the way around, okay? And again, here you've got to decide where you're having it, but I'm just going to do all the way through. I figure that's going to be the area that I'm going to be putting it on. Now you don't need to have a circle for your base, it's up to you, but I've decided a wee circle is easier. Personally, that's just my personal preference. But you may use whatever kind of shape you want. Add the slip. And then don't forget to add the slip to this. Remember you slipped and scored all of it and we're attaching it. And pin it on. Gently press it down, and again you want to make sure you smooth in where it's joining down. So if that means that you're just giving it a wee extra press. So I'm using the back of my fingernail to press it down. For those that do not have fingernails or long fingernails, or you're very clean and tidy, I'm not, use your back of your tool and just gently scoop a wee bit of clay down from it, and you just gently press it in. Okay, gently press it in and work with it as you go along and make sure it's nice and smooth. So there should be no joins. You shouldn't really be able to see your joins. It should be nice and smooth, nice and smooth. So just keep doing that, and if it means that you need to pick it up, have a wee look at it and see what you're doing, that's what you do all the way around. So all the way around. Okay, all the way around, as you see. Okay. And then if you've done it, you're like, oh, Karen, I've now done it, what do I do? Again, what you usually do, make sure if you've left your sponge in the water, you squeeze it out because you don't need lots of water. And what you do is you add a little bit of water just round the sides, So if you're like me, you've got long fingernails, you just need to make sure you don't dink clay with your fingernails. Okay, so nice smooth joins. So you're using the sponge to smooth out any of the creases that are still there, and just keep doing that. Now you're thinking, my sponge is too big, what else would I use? Well, if you've been using a paintbrush, you can always use the paintbrush and just gently brush it in. Okay, you've got various options of what to do. So if you don't have a paintbrush and you do use a pencil, you can always use your pinky finger, dip it in water and just gently smooth it round. Okay, so a sponge, pinky finger, paintbrush, essentially anything as long as you get it in and it's nice and smooth. Okay, all the way around. Okay, any options. And you'll find as you go along that you'll be like, oh, I could use that. Well, if you could use that, then just go for it. If it belongs to someone else, then you might need to ask permission. But if it's yours and you think it's going to work, As long as it's not something expensive, you should be fine, but it should be okay. Okay, there we go. So again, you can put it on the surface. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on my plastic sheet because I know it's not going to stick to my plastic sheet. I'm gently going to move these out of the way. 2 seconds. I'll move all my wee products out of the way. There we go. So I now don't have the fear of it sticking to my board. There we go. Okay, and that's only because I had wet hands and I touched the base of it, so that would stick to the board if I left it on too long. And I don't want to have a wee fight with it, because remember, wet clay will stick to the wooden board. So I've got my base and I've got my wee stem. That's in here. Okay, so now you've got the egg cup. So again, measure it, see if you're happy with that, roughly about the same. So again, what you've got to do is slip and score it. Okay, slip and score it. So again, you score it. And you've got to make sure you score the top as well. Now at the end of this, you will be putting a hole in the base, just so, because there'll be a vacuum in there. Once you put it on the top, there'll be a vacuum, so again, you've got to poke a hole in it. Not from the top down, but from the base up. Okay. And add some slip. And press it down. Now make sure you're happy with it. If you're thinking, my egg cup is not quite the way I want it, don't panic. We'll be working on that. You'll be doing a wee bit of sponging, so nothing to panic. So there we go. So again, press it up or down with the clay as it goes. If for some reason you don't like how the join is looking, just use some of your scrap clay that you've got, that you've trimmed off, and a bit like with the big bird that you were doing with the tail, just give it a wee roll. And because you've already added slip, but there's nothing wrong with adding a little bit more slip, and you just put slip around where you need it, or where you think you need it, and then you'd add that little collar all the way around, okay, and then smooth it in. Alright, but if you don't need it, then don't worry about it, just keep going. So if you have a collar, put on a collar, and again, it's the same kind of joining process as before that you've already done, and just make sure you can see what you're joining. So if it means that you maybe need a wee box to have it a wee bit higher so you can see what you're doing, you can do that, or you can just gently pick it up. Just remember to flatten it out. The more you handle this, because it's not firm, then the more chance there is of the clay ripping or tearing, and then you've got to like do maybe a rejoin or make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay, so that's the thing that you'll need to watch out for is when you're doing this, is there is chances that if you don't make it sturdy enough that it's going to rip and it's going to topple over, which you don't want. Okay, so now you're like, it looks a bit like a tree. That's good, don't panic about it, we're working with it. So we've got this, and you can smooth it in. So we've got the top joint, the stem, and the base, so it's all good. So your next stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth out the middle, because we're going to be doing the head next. And if we don't do it just now, then you'll find that when you come to doing the head, then you want to do it, you're going to find it's a wee bit awkward, simply because the head's going to be in the way, you can't quite grip it. Okay, so just smooth it out, and I'm just using a damp sponge. Okay, just using sponge, and it should be a nice smooth inside. Okay, nice smooth all the way around. So you want to do this until you're quite happy with the finish. Okay, till you're nice and happy. And if you're like, oh, but I've moved it, then just use a sponge and just make sure that the base is nice and secure the way you want it. That's where you just need to put an extra press, where you just put that down a wee bit more, and that's what you do, okay? You do that until you're happy with it. Okay, so now I've got a nice egg cut, I've smoothed everything in, and I'm ready to rock and roll with the next stage. Now, this is also a time to point out that if you don't like the rounded effect and you want it like a bit of a cleaner cut, like this, then what you do is you want to get one of your flat blade edges, and again, we're not talking about a real knife, we're talking about your plastic tool, and you just gently give it a little light trim round the side, okay? You can angle it if you want and just give it a wee trim. Now remember, if you've already worked on it and it's maybe a wee bit too sticky, then you wait until it's a wee bit drier, that's fine. Or you can wait till it's completely dry and then give it a wee going over with the tool. But we'll talk about that at the end, and I'll show you a wee bit of what we're doing. So again, if you want a nicer shape, just gently smooth it around. So this is all stuff that you could do as you go along, or you can wait till the end. It's entirely up to you how you feel. It's personal preference in this one. So again, if you think there's raggy edges and you just need to tidy it up, that's fine. Okay, so there we go. So up to you, you can do it there or you can do it at the end. So for the head, I'm using the clay that we left over before. Now you don't need a big ball, but you do need to make sure it's a nice size. So I think that's quite a nice size to test it out. And remember, it's going to be like a mini pinch pot that you're attaching, okay? So you will need, definitely for this one, something else other than your fingers for making a pinch pot. This is definitely where you'd be wanting a paintbrush or a pencil, a pen, or anything with a round base or flat base. You just want to make sure it's something that you can use. You put your tool in the middle and you just gently press it outway, okay? And you just do that until you have a nice pinch pot, okay? And then once you've done that, you can even use it and just smooth it, stroke it up a wee bit, just to get that effect in that shape. So again, like when you're doing with the big bird, you're going to be using the excess clay to manipulate, and I'm using my pinchers, and you just gently get it into shape of what you're wanting, but you won't be doing that until it's attached. But if you're happy with that, then that's how it's looking. If you think that's a little bit big, what do? You can give it a wee trim just now, or you can half the clay and redo your pinch pot. It's entirely up to you on how you want to operate. In this case, it's entirely up to you. So you can trim it there, you can trim it when it's on, or you can redo your pinch pot. It's up to you, okay? But either way, we still need to slit and score it. So I would do the whole side. That way we don't need to worry about it. I need to slit and score this all the way around. So it does look a wee bit raggedy, don't worry about that. And then, yeah, just slip. Now what you want to do is make sure you don't have a big huge gunk in the middle, because remember, like with the big bird, you are going to be poking a hole in it to make sure there's no accidental explosions of your clay in the kiln. So you've got to remember you need to puncture a hole in it, and that prevents any unnecessary accidents from happening. So again, you attach it, make sure you're happy with whichever way it's going. I'm going to do it that way, and then attach it. And I'm gently, again, pressing it in. And because I've used the slip, I can actually let go of it and it's still attached. And then gently make sure it's all going in. And I'm just going to gently turn it around so you can actually see what I'm doing. So a bit like before, you've got to make sure you do that underneath as well. So you can use your fingernail, you can use your tool, anything that you've been using to attach everything before. And again, I'm just going to give it a gentle lift up because I actually want to make sure I've got everything underneath as well. Now I might end up trimming the underneath, but we don't worry about that just now. Okay, so got the head on, and now I want to reshape it a wee bit to make it look like a bit like a chicken's egg, or a chicken head, should I say. Now this is only working if you're actually doing the chicken. If you're doing something else, then fantastic. If you're doing the chicken, then you want to manipulate the head a wee bit. And this is where you've got to think about, what do chickens actually look like? And I know you're thinking, that sounds really silly. It's not, because you'll be like, oh, what does it look like? What I needed to do when I was doing this one, I had a flat top and it was a bit of an angle coming down, and that's just so when I get the beak, it made a wee bit more sense. So just now, it's not looking very much chicken-like. These things happen. So you can use a tool for it, you can dab your finger in and just get the shape that you're wanting, okay? So this might take a wee while for you to do and you're happy with it. Nothing wrong with that. If it's going to take you a wee while to get what you're wanting, that's okay. Again, to reshape it, pinchers, and just gently pinch it. And remember, if you've put stuff on and you're like, there's just too much clay there, how do I get it off? Just use the tool and just gently take off the clay that you don't like and reshape it, okay? And just do that until you're happy with what you've got. So that's if you've used too much clay and you're not happy with it, you can reshape it. And if you're like, well, what happens if it leaves a hole in the bottom? Don't panic about that. We'll worry about that when we get to that stage, because you can always fill in the gap and there's nothing to worry about. Okay? Remember, it's clay, you'll be able to use it and manipulate it so you're happy with it. And you're like, oh, what's happening with the stem? Don't worry about the stem. Again, you can fix it, you can attach it. The whole bit is, you want to get the head the way you want it, okay? So if that's where you're just getting in, you shape it, there we go, I'm getting the shape that I want. And now, I feel there's too much here, I just give it a little trim there. And there we go. And you just keep doing that until you're happy. And I'm just going to give it a nice wee cut in. That's just a personal thing that I'm doing. And just bring it away. Now if there's lots that's coming away, don't panic, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. So if yours is like that, now there's a wee gap here, because remember it was a pinch pot. Don't worry about that. So if it's a pinch pot, you've got a wee gap because you've cut away some clay. Don't panic, because remember, you're wanting a hole anyway, so on the bright side, you know that there's no lumps of clay inside. And what you're going to do is gently, with pinky finger, or your tool, paintbrush, whatever, and gently seal it over, and you're just gently rubbing it, okay? Gently rubbing it. And you just do that until you're happy with it and you've got all the joins. Because we're not at the stage of poking the holes in it. So you want to make sure you're happy with all your joins. And this is a good time to make sure all your joins are where you want them and they're looking how you want. So you give it a wee rub and you just keep doing that until you're happy with the joins. Okay. So just because you're closing over a hole, you're not squishing it. Because you're squishing it, then you might not have an actual vacuum or wee hole there. Okay, you're just sealing over the hole to make sure you've got the look that you want, and you make sure you get all the joints nice and smooth. And if you see that I'm moving this about, my base and my stem is moving, don't worry about that, because remember it's fresh clay, so it's very easy for you to fix and sort that problem out. Okay, so this might happen to you, and it most likely will, so I don't want you to panic, which is why we're doing it this way, so you can see any of the potential things that's going to happen and how you are going to fix them at home without having to worry. So again, I've moved it, I'm using my pinky and I'm just going to smooth it all down. And again, if it's sticking, that's good, but if it's sticking too much, then a wee bit more water, give it a rub and make sure it's nice and sealed all the way around. But you've got to remember, the more you handle it, this is what's going to happen. So it's really important that you remember that, okay? Gently smooth it in and make sure it's done. And if you think, oh, but there's a tear at the bottom, then you put a wee collar on it, like what we did before. But we'll go over it again in case you've forgotten, or in case that you're like, there's like a massive tear, what do? You're not going to panic, you're just going to work with it. Okay, so now that we've done that, you might be like, oh, but Karen, it's like a lump there. Just gently press in, and there we go. So we've now got the chicken head and the nice dish going. Okay, so it's fine. So if you've maybe put it out of shape, just gently give it a wee tease back in to shape, and that'll be you. Okay, so this is a good time before we add any extra frills to make sure you've actually put some holes in the head now. So you've now firmly attached it, smoothed it all in, and it's all looking good, and you've got a beak. Okay, so again, I'm using a small wee tool, and it's up to you if you want to put it in the nostrils or if you want to put it underneath, but I'm going to put it in the nostrils again because it's a nice hidden bit. Right, you can make it as deep as you want, because I just like to make sure it's all there. Okay, so poked a hole in it, so I now know it's safe. So the next feature that you want to do is you can put the wee frills on the head, but I've worked quite a lot with the head just now, so I feel it's a wee bit tacky for me, so I'm going to use the time to do the tail, and by that time this should be ready for me to work back on. Alright, so I'm going to just gently move this about so we can all work on the same bit together. Don't worry if you've got wee marks on your base, nothing to panic about, because you'll be smoothing that out, and if you want you can even trim it down, because as you see I've trimmed mine down, you can trim yours down, entirely up to you. So leftover clay, roll it. Now remember, if it's too dry, then don't use it. You can put a wee bit of water on it and see if it gets a wee bit more life in it, but if it's crumbling, then may as well just grab some more fresh clay. Okay, so there, again I'm pressing it down because it's like a leaf shape you're getting for this one. Now see how it branches out here? It means it's getting dry, but it can still work with it. But what you've got to remember is the more you work with clay, the drier it will get. But you don't want to waste your clay, but again, you don't want it too dry that you can't work with it. So you've got to have a happy medium, and you've got to do a judgment call. So you can test it out and see how it works. If you don't like it, then you just get some new clay. So a wee bit of creasing, but I'm not going to worry about that just now because I'm going to add some water afterwards. I'm going to give it a wee cut in a leaf shape. I'm making it a big leaf shape because obviously that's the tail. Okay, take the end away. There we go. I'm just going to move this so I don't accidentally elbow it. So it doesn't not need to be perfect because you can trim it off at the bottom. And in case you're thinking, Karen, can I use a pair of scissors? Of course you can. Any tool that you're happy with, you can use. Now to tidy up the sides, like what we did before, I've got my damp sponge and I'm going to just gently wipe it there. See how it's smoothing it out without me actually having to worry about anything else. So gently do that all the way around. It's we cheat, you can do this. Entirely up to you. See, nice and smooth. And keep doing that. So you keep doing that until you're happy. You don't want it like soaking, but again, you don't want it too much. Okay, there we go. Now remember, when it gets fully dry, then you'll be able to brush away all the extra wee bits that seem to be hanging about. So what I did before I attached it was I put on my design. That's the wee feather effect. Okay, leaf design, feather effect. In this principle, because it's meant to be feathers, it's feather design. If we're doing leaves, then it'll be a leaf design. I know, same thing, but a different word, just because we're using it for different things. So in the middle, lightly score it all the way up, and I'm just going to punch it out like this. Now we are going to be using our hands to manipulate it into shape, and that would mean that you might damage your design a wee bit, but not to worry about it because you can fix it. Okay, so again, straight, but I've got this curved and that's curved and I want it to join. So what you've got to remember is gently, not too much, you don't want to push it. I'm using my back of my fingers on my thumb where I'm wanting it to move to give it a wee bit of support, and I'm using the top just to press it back just a wee bit like this. Okay, just a wee bit. So this bit I'm going to score, and I'm going to score this. I know you're thinking, but you've already scored it. We want a proper score just to make sure it's actually going to stick. Okay. And you've got to make sure you score this as well. Make sure it's nicely scored, nicely scored. Okay, there we go. And you want to add the slip. Again, make sure you put slip on both sides. One on the feathers that you're attaching, and one on the egg cup that you're attaching. Like this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is gently pressing it in, and I'm having to, because the egg cup's round, so I'm using my fingers to gently press it round into that shape. So it's going to stay, but obviously still go and get the attachment. And while you're doing this, you also want to make sure you gently get the sides firmly attached to it as well. So gently press it down and firmly attach. So you might need to take a wee bit of time to do this, so it's actually where you want. Nothing wrong with that. And in case you're thinking, is it actually joining how I want? If you're not entirely too sure, you can always add a little bit of slip on the top, and I would even add a wee bit of water. It just helps to get that moving a wee bit. So you're definitely in the crease. So if there's any gaps, it's going to work its way down and you should be fine. Okay. So again, make sure it's all attached and you're pushing it all down and it's a nice edge, clean edge. So you'll take your time to finish that. Push it all down. And make sure, you want to make sure it does actually stay attached. because if it doesn't attach, then the likelihood is that your tail is going to fall off, and you don't want that. That'd be a shame. So gently attach that, and this way you want to make sure you've got a nice smooth edge where it's all attaching. So I'm using my fingernail. If you want to use a tool, you can use a tool. You just gently want to make sure it's all how you want. So some of this you can tidy up when it's actually a lot drier and firmer, but in some cases you do actually need to do it before it gets to that stage, because if you don't do it now, then the likelihood is that by the time you get to do it, you won't have a tail. Okay, make sure it's fully attached. And just press it in. If that's where you're just like going over, you're like, I've already been over this side, it's fine, don't worry about it. So mine's tilting a wee bit, so you just give it a wee nudge, and then that's you. Okay. There we go. Now remember, you're working with it, so any things that you're thinking, any cosmetics that you're not liking, that means if you're thinking it's not looking pretty or there's wee edges, you can tidy that afterwards. But what you want to do is make sure that everything is firmly attached now, because it might be too late later. So make sure it's all happy, you're attached, and you're smoothing out as you go. Don't want a lot of water, just a wee bit, just to make sure it's nice and it's looking good. Okay, so it's make sure, this is all to make sure it's fully attached. Okay, fully attached, because you do not want anything falling off, because that'd be terrible. Okay, if you can't get into it, then you can use a wee paintbrush, or like before, use your pinky and rub it in. Okay, up to you what you want to use. Good thing about using a wee paintbrush is you can just give it a wee dab in various places without having to worry about having everything else falling over. If you think there's a wee gap somewhere, you're not happy with it, add a wee bit of slip to the brush and just give it a little rub in with it, and that'll fill up with any cracks that you think you've got. We shouldn't be having any issues, but just in case, there's no harm in giving it a wee extra bit, and just want to make sure it's all under. And this would be a good time to lift it up, but if you've been doing this, then I would leave the lifting up till a lot later when it's a wee bit drier. Not too dry. See, if you wait till this stage of colour, it's too dry. So you want it firmer, but not tacky. So this is quite tacky just now, which means it's not dry enough for you, but not too dry. It's that happy medium. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do the ridge bits of the hen, and then the gullet, and then the eyes, and that'll be you. So again, I'm using my leftover clay because that's what I've got and I don't want to waste it. You can put it in a wee ball if you like, thumb and forefinger, or you can use the table, tie that to you. Now you've got to be aware that if you've been using lots of water with the clay, that your hands are going to be a wee bit sticky, so you've got to be careful of that. And I'm just going to gently press it down. So what you want is you want it thin but not too thin, because if you make it too thin, you're not going to be able to really work with it, and you don't want it to stick into the table either. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a wee slice. You may either use a tool, give it a wee slice, or you can give it with a pair of scissors. It's entirely up to you how you want to do. Now, what I've done is I've made sure there's a flat base here, because that's easier for the ridge. Now, it depends on what your chicken looks like, would depend on how you want to do this, okay? But essentially, we want to make sure this has been scored and slipped. I definitely put a little bit of texture here, and you add some slip to both ends onto the chicken's head, and then underneath where the cap of the quills are. There we go. Just gently press it down. Now, remember, you can always work on this afterwards when it's a wee bit firmer, so nothing to worry about. And I bet you're like, it doesn't look like what you made earlier. That's correct, it doesn't. But I'm not panicking about it just yet. I'm going to make sure it's all fully joined on both sides. So you've got to make sure it's both sides fully joined. And if you want it a wee bit more, then you can use your tool. And I'm using my paintbrush actually. And I'm going to press it down. So this is where it gets a wee bit more of a ridge to it. You just press it down, make sure it's in position, and then you can even press it down a wee bit further, make sure it's fully on. There we go, and it's a wee ridge, and then press again. There we go. So now it's actually looking a lot more like what you had before. I'm using a paintbrush to make sure the joints are nice and clean. You don't need to do the paintbrush, you can use your pencil, you can use your fingernail, or you can use one of your blue tools. It's up to you, whatever is going to work for you. I'm just making sure it's nice and clean. And remember, you can always overwork clay, so if you think you've done enough, you want to give it a wee stop. But you also want to make sure it is smooth and not where bits are going to fall off. So make sure everything is fully attached. Okay, and there we go. And the last thing I need to do is the underneath bit. Okay, so I've done this bit, we've got the pointy beak, you've got this. If you're thinking my beak is not pointy, Karen, what do I do? Essentially, you really just want to push it down a wee bit more with your fingernail and push it in. Because what you want to do is get a wee sharp point, or you can just gently. And this is where I definitely use a wee paintbrush just to get the wee ends, and I'm happy with that. Okay, there we go. Right, so now for the bottom bit. Again, as you see, I've got a little bit of scratch clay here, I've still got these here, that's fine. Just use one that's feeling quite nice, so it's feeling very soft and malleable, so it means it's ready and it's still okay for me to use. I'm just going to give it a nice flat pinch instead of on the table, flat pinch. And I want a curved shape, so I don't need to worry about making sure it's anything much. So trim the top off, straight line as possible. Now you've got to remember that if you have one of this size, but you've got a small head, it's not going to work. Okay, look at that. So you've got to trim it to the most appropriate size for what you're needing. This maybe if you have a pair of scissors, it might be helpful, but again, remember with clay, it can get a wee bit messy. So you just want to trim it down until you're happy with the size. Okay, so once you've done that, again, I would give it a wee smooth out on a sponge, just so it's nice tidy, because trying to do this when it's attached is going to be quite difficult. And make sure you get it all the way around, because that means that you're getting it ready to be attached. And here, you've got to be careful about where you're joining it, so just score it lightly. and because you've obviously done some work on it, and a wee bit of slip, but if it's quite wet, you might not need to use the slip. You can just gently press it on, and this is where you've got to be careful about where you're putting it, so you've got to judge it yourself. Okay, just press it on, and again you've got to work it on, make sure it's all smoothed in. If this is where you're like, Karen, this is too tiny, what do? Get a little bit of your scrap clay, and you can just add a wee bit of water to it, and this way you can just literally press in maybe a wee bit. So it's a bit like when you're putting the collar on anywhere else, but you're adding it. If you're like, that's still too hassly for me and too fidgety, use your paintbrush or anything else that you're using and just press it in, or use the end of the tool and to do it. What you want to do is make sure that there's definitely a firm join for what you've attached. So just so we don't have any accidents and nothing falls off. Okay, so because we've done work with the head, again you want to make sure your nostrils are fine, and that really, to be honest, is what you're kind of wanting. So make sure there is definitely holes there, so air can escape. And remember what I said a wee while ago when we were doing the base, you want to make sure you put a hole at the bottom, remember? So you've got a hole where you're working on it, but you've got to get a hole in the middle. So it should go all the way up, so that's fine, not all the way. So you don't want it coming out the top, just the base. Make sure it's wide enough so air can escape. There we go. Any joins that you see that need to be a little bit more better joined, then just take the time to do this just now, and that saves any hassle later on. Okay, just make sure it's nicely joined and there's definitely no creases or gaps of any kind that you can see. Okay, so just take the time just now to do it, because that will be better for you in the long run. And if you think you're not entirely too happy with the head, well, I would just go with what you've got until it's maybe a wee bit drier, and then you can either rework it a wee bit. And just remember, it's going to look different when you glaze it, okay? When it's dry and it's been glazed, it's going to look totally different. It's going to look fabulous. So if you're thinking you're not entirely too sure about it, don't worry about it. What you want to do is make sure it's a flat base, and if it's all flat, then that's you. Okay? And if you think, oh, what about eyes? You can either put a little poke in it for the eyes, that's fine, or you can add a little bit of clay. So if I was adding a little bit of clay, and it's a little bit of clay, it's like this big, it's like a tiny bit. You want to make sure wherever you're putting the eye, it's a wee bit damp, and just gently press it in. I'm just going to flick it around so it looks a bit weird just now, and then I'm going to use the end of my brush and just gently press it in. Okay, and then you do the same with the other side. So by the time you come round and you look at it, I'm going to just move that, and if you're not liking the eye position, just gently move it up, and then I'm just going to give it another wee press. If you're thinking, oh, I don't really like its pressing, then with the tool that you've used, then just poke it in, and it's going to look a bit like that. And if you don't really like it, then just take off the eye, smooth it off, and that'll be you. And don't forget to do the other eye as well. Okay, so that is one way of doing a nice little egg cup. Well, hello there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you roughly what to do with the Loch Ness edition. If you want a dragon, you want a butterfly, anything you want, go for it. I'm just showing you another example on how to do it. Okay, so I'm going to gently move these out of the way so you can dry that way. Just wherever you're moving it to, make sure you press down the base and move this out of the way. And I've still got my clay from before, and I've got my scrap clay. I'm going to put it in a wee ball, because either I can use that again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a wee bit of water on it and just keep it nice and fresh and the size. So you make sure you have a nice smooth surface. Your clay, you want to make a pinch pot, so you want a roll ball. Now you don't need lots of clay for this, so if you're thinking that's going to be too big, because remember you are making a wee egg cup, so you want to be able to have the egg sit in it. So you've got to think about, is this going to be too big? So there's a possibility it's too big, but then if you make it too small, then you're not going to have enough clay left for everything else. So you need a happy medium. If any chance you think that's about the same size that I want, but maybe I want a wee bit of clay off, just pinch again, and you just take a wee bit off at the sides. Not a lot, because you'll find if you take too much, that'll be the bit that you actually needed. Okay, again, roll it into a nice wee ball shape. Doesn't need to be a perfect ball shape, but you just want it a nice wee ball shape. Okay, 2 thumbs in, and this is where you should be fine just pressing it out like this. Okay, so your 2 thumbs in, and then you press it round. Okay, I'm doing my finger so you can see it, but thumbs and in and round. Okay, not too big, because obviously you want to make sure the egg will fit in it. So you've got to remember the egg has to fit in it. So here you'd like a flat base, so if you want to give it a little hit on the table, or you can give it a gentle press, up to you. The only thing is, you've got to remember, you don't want the clay too thick. This is where you want to either use your finger to push it up, but if you're like, Karen, I think my clay's drying out, that's where you use your sponge and just give it a nice wee smooth out instead, and let the sponge do all the hard work for you, and you'll be like, oh, I can just like sit back and chill and just smooth it out. That's totally fine as well. Okay, so you've made a nice wee pinch pot. Okay, nice and smooth. Right, there we go. There we go. So you can smooth around the sides. This is probably a good time to do this. Any time's a good time to do it, to be fair, but if you do it just now before we do anything else, then at least then we know we've got stuff at least halfway sorted. So make sure it is what you're liking. If you don't like it, now's the time to fix any wee tweaks that you want to do. Okay, so there we go, smooth out. So simple as. Now I'm going to use the bit that I pinched off. If you didn't pinch anything off, use your scrap clay for your next bit, which we're doing the neck. Okay, so we're doing this bit here. For me, it's the Loch Ness Monster. If you're using something else, you can call it giraffe if you want, elephant, anything you want, okay? But I'm doing the Loch Ness Monster. That's what I've called it, that's what we're sticking with. I'm going to make it into a ball, and I'm going to make it into a bit of a sausage as well. So the trick is making sure it's not a flat sausage, you want a round sausage. There's always a bit of a happy medium. Okay, so I don't need it really long, but I do need it long enough. So if you're thinking it's quite a nice shape, but you want a wee bit more length, you just gently squeeze it, gently, not too much, because you don't want it really skinny. You just want nicely do it. And again, with this, a bit like everything else, you want to make sure you put a hole in the middle, so you can either use a pointy tool or your pencil or paintbrush, anything, all the way through. If it doesn't go all the way through, then you know that you need a longer tool and push it all the way through, or you can do it from the top to the bottom. The only problem is you don't know if it meets in the middle, so you want to make sure it can go and it can meet. Give it a wee twist, and that should be fine. So a bit like when you were doing the stem, you can do the same with the stem as you're doing with the neck. It's entirely up to you, okay, before you then roll it. Now I've got a raggedy bit here, I'm just going to gently use my finger and just take it off, or you can use one of your tools and just gently give it a wee slice, okay, that's fine. What you've got to remember is, now you have to attach it, you've got to think about where. So if this way you're like, oh, I want it a wee bit longer, just gently make it a wee bit longer, not a lot. And then you have to give it a nice wee edge. And then add a little bit of slip. Both sides, and then you want to gently press it in, and then you want to attach it. So use your fingernail, use your paintbrush, use your pencil, or use the blue tool and use the back of it. Anything that you've been using before is fine as long as you're happy with it, and gently press it in. So use the tip of it and take some clay down and attach like so, okay? So don't worry about it, you want a wee hole at the top to make sure it doesn't explode in the kiln, always a handy thing. Make sure it's nicely smooth as seen before. There we go, okay. So now you've done the neck, so we've got the egg cup, we've got the neck, so you want the head. So again, this is a good time to do this. And you've got, I'm having a wee ball. Now that's going to be probably about the size that you're wanting. But we want it maybe hanging over a wee bit here, like so. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure it's in the kind of shape that I want. Okay, so I just want it in the shape I want before I attach it. The extra details you can wait till it's a wee bit drier, but you want to make sure you can attach it. Now in case you're like, but Karen, what we're going to do, because you've got a hole and a tube in the middle, you're going to puncture a wee hole in the bit to let air escape, and you're going to make sure that the mouth is open a wee bit as well. So just in case, you're covering all your bases and you're sorted. Okay. Gently attach it. So again, if that's you and you're happy with that, gently attach it up. And then if you think that these have a wee bit more of a head, then just give it a little squeeze. Again, pinchers, and make sure you're happy with your neck as well, okay? So everything's all fully attached now. So this is where I want to make sure I put my holes in where I need them, but I also want to make sure I've smoothed out any edges that need to be smooth, because it all needs to be nice and smooth like this. So this is where you can gently just smooth everything the way you want to make sure everything's firmly attached and it looks nice and clean, So if it's where you need to maybe press things down, go for it, because remember you'll be putting a wee hole in to make sure it lets any of the air escape that needs to be escaping, okay? So nothing to panic about that. Make sure it's nice and tidy. Now remember, you'll be able to do this when it's a wee bit drier. Okay. There we go. So what I'm going to do before I do anything else, I'm just going to put Once I've attached that quite nicely, there we go. I'm going to just put a wee puncture just there, and that just allows any air to escape if I need to, okay? So that be assured. But it depends on obviously where you've attached everything. You might want to put it up under the neck or where the open mouth is. But I'm going to do the open mouth now. I'm going to use my pointy bit to get the mouth open and put it in. And I'm going to wiggle it about because my Loch Ness, I want to have an open mouth. So I'm just gently making it look like it has an open mouth. And then press it down. And then that should be it. So you can put on the facial features and eyes as you go, up to you. And what I do, just because I really like quirky things, I put eyebrows on it. Eyebrows, ridges, you may use any terms that you'd like. I'm just going to give it a wee roll. So I've just used, again, a little bit of clay. Now this is quite sticky clay, so it means that there's going to be enough grip on there. I don't need to add any slip. And I'm putting it on at an angle, because if you put it on at an angle, it immediately has a bit of a personality. And make sure you do fully join it and smooth it the way. If your hands are too big, then this is where a wee paintbrush or a small wee fingernail would do the trick, and just make sure you fully attach it where you want it. Top and bottom, make sure it's there. And this is also where if you want to push it up and get more of a personality with the eyebrow, you can. And if you see anything that you really want to work on once you're there, just may as well just get it all in the grips whilst you're doing that small wee task. So anything that you think needs to be smoothed out, now's your time to do it. And then I'm going to do the same with the other side. Again, eyebrow. I'm just rolling it a wee bit. Again, I'm putting that at an angle, so you can see. So again, it gives it personality. It doesn't need to be perfect. I don't feel it needs to be perfect. I feel it gives it more of a quirky personality. That's just me. And again, just smooth it in. Now, I'm adding a wee bit of water. And here, I don't want a wee lump there, so I'm just going to press that down. And make sure you've got the underneath bit as well covered. And make sure that's fully in as well. Okay, so everything is nicely being smoothed in. So now, we've got a mouth, got eyes, and it's looking quite fierce, and I've punctured holes where I need them. Okay, so if you think that hole's too big and you've got it up here, that's fine. You can press that over, and that'll be you, and just make it sure it's a wee gap. It's entirely up to you, but you need to make sure that you have got a hole in it somewhere, just in case there's a build-up of steam and it allows it to get out somewhere, because if you don't, then there's an issue. If you're like, I don't want to do the neck and I don't want to do the mouth, then you can do it where the eyes are. Okay, you can just put a little bit where the eyes are and just gently press them in. And that way it's hidden within the features of whatever you're making. So you've got the neck, you've got the head, and it's up to you if you want to do the tail. I did a wee tail before. You might not want to do a tail. You might want a long one, it's up to you, or you might want to just leave it the way it is. Up to you. So again, if you're going to be working on this again, you want to wrap it up, you can use a sandwich bag, you put it over and put it somewhere where it's ready and waiting for you to go and rework it if you need to work it or tidy it up. If you're like, I'm happy with it 100%, then just leave it sitting out to dry somewhere where it's not going to get in the way or damaged. And any leftover clay you put in a ball and then you put it back in your bag, and then any scraps you put back into your little tub of scraps where you slip. Okay, and that's us. Thank you very much for joining.